Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, Foundations. Victor Hargrove slammed the hood of his truck closed, wiping engine grease from his calloused hands with a dirty rag. For years of sweat equity had transformed what began as a small construction company into something substantial. Not that anyone would believe it from the outside, especially not his wife's family. Still playing with your little hammers? A text from Natalie lit up his phone. Her way of diminishing his work hadn't changed in the 9 years they'd been married. Victor didn't bother responding. Tonight, her family would arrive for their biannual visit, a ritual of condescension and thinly veiled insults, primarily directed at him and his quaint attempt at entrepreneurship. He drove home to their modest 3-bedroom house in the suburbs. It wasn't extravagant, but it was paid for, something he'd accomplished through silent perseverance while Natalie complained about not living in a neighborhood that reflected their potential. As he pulled into the driveway, he spotted Natalie through the kitchen window, pacing with her phone pressed to her ear. Her animated gestures told him everything. Another secret call to whoever had been making her smile at her phone for months now. Inside, she quickly ended her call. Finally, they'll be here in 2 hours. I need you to clean yourself up and be presentable for once. She wrinkled her nose at his work clothes. And please, if they ask about your business, don't go into tedious details. Just say it's fine and change the subject. Victor nodded, saying nothing about the call he'd just had with his business partner, Alexander Reed. After years of grinding, they'd received an acquisition offer from Meridian Construction Group, $14 million. The paperwork was finalized that morning, but Victor had kept it quiet. He wanted to see how far Natalie and her family would go in their disparagement before he revealed the truth. He showered and dressed in a simple button-down shirt and slacks, ignoring Natalie's suggestion to wear the expensive watch her father had given him last Christmas, a gift that came with the comment, "At least you'll own one valuable thing." As he straightened his collar, Victor's phone buzzed with a text from Alexander. "Everything's set for tomorrow afternoon. The check presentation will be quite the show." Victor smiled faintly at his reflection. Patience had always been his strongest virtue. By evening, the Prescott family had invaded. Natalie's father, Douglas, a banking executive who measured worth exclusively in dollars. Her mother, Patricia, whose smile never reached her eyes, and her younger brother, Trent, who had failed upward through life on family connections. Their luxury SUV and designer luggage filled the modest entryway, bringing with them an air of superiority that seemed to instantly inflate Natalie's ego. "Victor, still driving that rust bucket I see," Douglas commented after dinner, swirling expensive scotch he brought because "I doubt you keep anything worth drinking." "It gets me where I need to go," Victor replied simply. "That's the problem with you, son," Douglas said, the son dripping with condescension. "No ambition, no vision. Natalie deserved someone who could give her the lifestyle she was raised to expect." Victor noticed how Natalie didn't defend him. Instead, she stared at her phone, a faint smile playing on her lips as she texted someone. Later that night, after enduring hours of thinly veiled insults about his career, his home, and his capability as a provider, Victor overheard Natalie in the kitchen with her mother. "I don't know how much longer I can do this, Mom," Natalie whispered, unaware that Victor stood in the hallway shadow. "Darling, he's just a disappointment," Patricia replied. "We all see it. You married potential that never materialized." "Brett says I deserve better," Natalie murmured. "Your boss certainly seems to think highly of you," Patricia responded with knowing emphasis. Victor silently retreated, his suspicions confirmed. Brett Sullivan, Natalie's boss at the marketing firm where she worked. The late nights, the weekend, emergencies, the sudden business trips. It all made sense now. He made his way to the living room couch that had been prepared for him because the guests need the guest room, and Trent needs his space. As he lay in the dark, Victor didn't feel anger, only a cold, clarifying resolve. Tomorrow would change everything, but not in the way Natalie or her family anticipated. Chapter 2, Revelations. Victor woke before dawn, his back stiff from the uncomfortable couch. Through the kitchen window, he watched the sun rise, painting the sky in hues of amber and gold. Today would be the day everything changed. He prepared breakfast for everyone: pancakes, bacon, fresh fruit, and coffee. A peace offering, they might think, or the actions of a man trying too hard to impress. Let them believe what they wanted. "Morning, Victor," Douglas said, emphasizing his name like it was a joke. "Playing house husband today?" "Just being hospitable," Victor replied, sliding a plate of pancakes across the counter. Natalie entered, already dressed immaculately for the day, not bothering to thank Victor for breakfast. She kissed her father's cheek and poured herself coffee, checking her phone immediately. "So, Victor," Douglas began after everyone had gathered at the table, "Natalie tells us your little construction venture is struggling. Have you considered getting a real job? I'm sure I could find something entry-level at the bank. Nothing fancy, mind you, but steady." Victor speared a piece of pancake. "What makes you think it's struggling?" "Well," Douglas exchanged glances with Natalie, "my daughter says you've been taking on fewer projects, working longer hours, and seems stressed about money. Classic signs of a failing small business." Victor turned to Natalie. "Interesting interpretation of our conversations." Natalie shifted uncomfortably. "Don't be sensitive, Victor. Daddy's trying to help. What about that loan you took out last year?" Trent chimed in, mouth full of bacon. "Natalie mentioned you had to borrow against the house." Victor set down his fork. "Did she?" "Don't be embarrassed," Patricia interjected with syrupy sweetness. "Everyone has financial troubles at some point. They're usually not in their 40s. "I'm 38, Victor corrected. "Time flies when you're not accomplishing much," Douglas laughed, reaching for the syrup. Victor smiled tightly and passed it to him. "Indeed it does." After breakfast, Victor excused himself to make a phone call. In the backyard, away from prying ears, he confirmed the afternoon's arrangements with Alexander. Everything was set. When he returned inside, he overheard Natalie in the study, her voice low and intimate. "I can't talk long. They're just as awful as I described." "Yes, he made breakfast, trying to impress them as usual." "No, I haven't told him yet. I'm waiting for the right time." "Yes, I know we agreed on this weekend. I promise after they leave. I love you too." Victor stepped away, his resolve hardening. Not only was Natalie having an affair, but she was planning something, likely to ask for a divorce once her family left. The timing couldn't be more perfect. Throughout the day, the Prescotts continued their passive-aggressive commentary. Victor endured it silently, watching the clock. At 3 o'clock, he suggested everyone gather on the back patio for afternoon coffee. "I have a small surprise," Victor said mildly. "Please don't tell me you're dragging us to one of your construction sites," Trent groaned. "Nothing like that," Victor assured them. "Just thought we could enjoy the weather." As they settled onto the patio furniture, Victor's phone pinged. Right on time. "Excuse me for a moment," he said, walking toward the front of the house. Minutes later, he returned, followed by Alexander Reed in a tailored suit, and behind him, a photographer from the local business journal. "Everyone, this is my business partner, Alexander," Victor announced. The Prescotts stared in confusion. Alexander was clearly wealthy. From his Italian shoes to his Rolex watch, he exuded success in the language the Prescotts understood. "Pleasure to meet Vic's family at last," Alexander said warmly, though his eyes were calculating as they swept over the group. "Hope you don't mind the intrusion, but we wanted to make this official." He nodded to the photographer. "Make what official?" Natalie asked, standing up. Alexander removed an envelope from his jacket. "The buyout, of course. Meridian Construction couldn't be happier with the acquisition." Douglas frowned. "Acquisition? Of Victor's company?" Alexander looked genuinely surprised. "You didn't tell them, Vic?" Modest as always. He turned to the family. "Hargrove Construction has developed a proprietary modular building system that reduces construction time by 40% while meeting all sustainability requirements. Meridian has been pursuing us for months." Before anyone could respond, Alexander held out the envelope to Victor as the photographer positioned himself. $14 million buyout. "Congratulations," he announced, shaking Victor's hand as the camera flashed. A crash made everyone turn. Natalie had dropped her coffee cup, dark liquid spreading across the patio stones. Her face had drained of color. At 14 million, she stammered. Victor walked over to his wife, leaning close to her ear. I know about Brett, he whispered. And as of this moment, you get nothing. Natalie's knees buckled, and she collapsed in her chair, gasping for breath. Chapter 3. Consequences. The patio had fallen silent except for Natalie's ragged breathing. Victor straightened up, tucking the envelope into his pocket while the Prescotts stared in shock. Are you all right, Mrs. Hargrove? The photographer asked, lowering his camera. She's fine, Victor answered smoothly, just overwhelmed by the good news. We've kept this very quiet. Security reasons, you understand. Corporate espionage is a real concern in our industry. Alexander nodded knowingly. That's why we insisted on confidentiality agreements. Even family couldn't know until it was finalized. Douglas Prescott recovered first, his banker's instincts kicking in as the scent of money filled the air. Victor, my boy, he boomed, rising to clap him on the shoulder. You've been holding out on us. This calls for a celebration. Victor stepped away from his touch. Alexander, would you mind giving me a moment with my family? I believe we have some private matters to discuss. Of course, Alexander replied. I'll wait out front with Martin. We still need those final signatures for the transfer. Once Alexander and the photographer had gone, Victor turned to the Prescotts. Douglas was beaming. Patricia was straightening her blouse, as if preparing to be photographed, and Trent was already on his phone, likely updating his social media. Only Natalie remained frozen, her face ashen. $14 million, Douglas said reverently. I had no idea your little operation was worth that much. You weren't supposed to, Victor replied coldly. And it wouldn't have been if I'd listened to Natalie's constant criticism or your belittling advice. Now, Victor, Patricia began, her tone suddenly honeyed. Family can sometimes be too honest, but it's only because we care. Victor laughed, a sound without humor. Is that what you call it? When you whispered to Natalie last night that I was just a disappointment? When Douglas here suggested I get an entry-level bank job? When Trent mocked my truck and my clothes? The Prescotts exchanged uncomfortable glances. Natalie finally found her voice. Victor, please, she said weakly. Let's talk about this privately. What? Victor asked. You've had no problem discussing our marriage with your family. Or with Brett Sullivan. Natalie's eyes widened. What are you talking about? Brett. Douglas frowned. Your boss, Natalie? Victor smiled thinly. More than her boss for the past 8 months. Isn't that right, Natalie? Patricia gasped. Trent's phone slipped from his fingers. This is absurd, Natalie sputtered. Victor's just trying to distract from... From what? Victor interrupted. From the fact that while I was building a multi-million-dollar company, you were planning to leave me? That you and Brett were going to tell me this weekend, after your family left? Natalie's silence was confirmation enough. You've been checking his texts, she finally said, her voice hardening with accusation rather than remorse. I didn't need to, Victor replied. You've been careless. Hotel receipts in your car. Late-night calls in the bathroom. The sudden business trips that Brett also happened to take. And just this morning, I heard you on the phone with him. Douglas cleared his throat. This is a private matter between you two. Perhaps we should. No, Victor cut him off. You don't get to slither away now. For years, you've treated me like dirt beneath your shoes. You've encouraged Natalie to see me as a failure. You've undermined our marriage at every opportunity. We only wanted the best for her. Patricia protested weakly. The best. Victor's voice remained measured but cold. The best would have been supporting her marriage. The best would have been respecting her husband. Instead, you validated her worst instincts, her materialism, her entitlement, her disloyalty. That's not fair, Natalie said, tears now streaming down her face. You were never here. Always working, always at job sites, always with Alexander. Building something, Victor responded. Building a future while you were tearing it down. He pulled out his phone and tapped the screen, then turned it to face them. On display was a series of text messages between Natalie and Brett. Intimate, explicit, damning. How did you get those? Natalie whispered. It doesn't matter, Victor said, pocketing the phone. What matters is I have them. along with hotel receipts, credit card statements, and photographs, all documented and already delivered to my attorney this morning. Douglas stepped forward, his banker's mind calculating rapidly. Now, Victor, I'm sure we can work something out. Marriages hit rough patches. This isn't a negotiation, Victor interrupted. It's an announcement. I've filed for divorce on grounds of adultery with substantial evidence. Given Minnesota's laws, Natalie's infidelity will be considered in the division of assets. You can't just, Natalie began. I already have, Victor stated firmly. The papers were served to your office this morning. Brett received his copy as well. Natalie's phone began ringing. She fumbled for it, saw Brett's name on the screen, and answered shakily. Brett? What's happening? Victor could hear the panic in Brett Sullivan's voice from where he stood. After a moment, Natalie lowered the phone, her expression horrified. He's been fired, she whispered. The company has a strict policy against managers having relationships with direct reports. They received anonymous evidence this morning. Victor nodded once. Consequences. You vindictive bastard, Natalie hissed, her shock turning to anger. You planned all of this. No, Victor corrected her. I simply decided not to be your victim anymore. Alexander and I have been working on this deal for months, long before I discovered your affair. The timing is fortunate. He turned to Douglas. You and your family need to leave. Now, pack your things and go to a hotel. This is Natalie's house too, Patricia objected. Actually, Victor replied, the house is solely in my name. Natalie insisted on keeping her name off the deed to protect her credit when we bought it. Another fortunate decision. Douglas puffed up. You can't just throw us out. I can and I am, Victor stated calmly. You have 30 minutes, or I call the police and report you for trespassing. As the reality of the situation sank in, the Prescotts' arrogance crumbled. 30 minutes later, they were gone, luggage hastily packed, Natalie sobbing in the back seat of her parents' SUV as they drove away. Victor stood in the driveway, watching them disappear. Alexander approached from his parked limousine. That went well, Alexander commented. Phase 1, Victor replied. They have no idea what's coming next. Chapter 4, Aftermath. 3 weeks after the Prescotts' disastrous visit, Victor sat in his attorney's office reviewing documents. The spacious corner suite offered panoramic views of downtown Minneapolis, a stark contrast to the cluttered cubicle where Natalie now worked as a customer service representative, the only job she could secure after being blacklisted in the marketing industry. She's asking for half of everything, despite the evidence of infidelity, said Dominic Weathers, Victor's attorney. The silver-haired lawyer had initially seemed too polished, too establishment for Victor's taste, but his ruthless efficiency had quickly proven his worth. That's not surprising, Victor replied, scanning the counter-proposal from Natalie's lawyer. What is surprising is that she thinks she has leverage. Dominic leaned back in his leather chair. Most clients in your position would settle. Offer her $1 million or $2 million to go away quietly. I'm not most clients, Victor said, his voice hardening. And this isn't just about money. Revenge is expensive, Dominic cautioned, both financially and emotionally. Victor looked up, his eyes cold. Then it's fortunate I have resources to spare. After the meeting, Victor drove to a small cafe in a quiet neighborhood. Inside, a tall, athletically built man waited at a corner table. Frank Donovan had served in military intelligence before becoming a private investigator. His services didn't come cheap, but his discretion and thoroughness were worth every penny. What did you find? Victor asked without preamble, sliding into the seat across from him. Frank pushed a manila folder across the table. Brett Sullivan isn't the first married man Natalie's been involved with. Victor nodded, unsurprised. How many? 3 that I could confirm over the past 5 years. All men in positions to advance her career. All married. Frank tapped the folder. Timeline, hotel receipts, photographs, witness statements from hotel staff. The works. And the Prescotts. Frank's expression turned grim. That's where it gets interesting. Douglas Prescott's banking career isn't as sterling as he pretends. He's been investigated twice for ethical violations. Both times, charges were dropped after witnesses suddenly changed their stories or evidence disappeared. Bribes? Almost certainly, but nothing provable. What is provable is that he helped several clients, including his son Trent, hide assets during divorce proceedings. Frank lowered his voice. The statute of limitations hasn't expired on the most recent case. Victor absorbed this information, connecting dots in his mind. And Patricia? Social climber with expensive habits. 3 DUIs in the past decade, all quietly handled through family connections. She's on the board of several charities, but schemes donations to fund her shopping addiction. Trent failed upward his entire life. Currently works at his father's bank in a position created specifically for him. Has a gambling problem he hides from the family. Owes nearly $200,000 to some unsavory characters. Victor sat back, processing this information. Good work. Frank hesitated. There's one more thing. Brett Sullivan isn't just Natalie's lover. They've been planning something beyond an affair. Victor leaned forward. Go on. They opened a joint account 6 months ago. Small deposits at first, then larger ones. Over $120,000 now. Money that appears to have come from your joint accounts with Natalie. Small withdrawals, time to avoid suspicion. A muscle tightened in Victor's jaw. She's been stealing from me. There's more. They purchased property together, a cabin on Lake Minnetonka. Paid in cash. The deed is in Brett's brother's name. Victor's eyes narrowed. They were planning their exit long before I discovered the affair. Appears so, Frank confirmed. And based on text messages my tech guy recovered, they were going to tell you about the divorce the weekend her family visited. The timing of your business deal threw off their plans. Victor stood, dropping several $100 bills on the table. Send me everything. And keep digging, especially into Douglas's banking activities and Trent's gambling debts. I want to know who he owes and how desperate they are to collect. As Victor drove home to the empty house, Natalie was staying with her parents while the divorce proceeded. He felt not anger, but a cold, calculating clarity. The Prescotts and Brett Sullivan had underestimated him for years. They had mistaken his patience for weakness, his silence for acceptance. That mistake would cost them everything. Chapter 5, Strategies. I want to destroy them, Victor stated calmly, sitting across from Alexander in the new offices of their consulting firm. After selling their construction company, they had established Hargrove Reed Strategic Consulting, specializing in construction industry mergers and acquisitions. Alexander raised an eyebrow. All of them? That's ambitious, even for you. They're connected, Victor explained. The Prescotts, Brett, Natalie, they operate as a unit. Douglas provides financial advice, Patricia handles social connections, Trent does whatever dirty work needs doing, and Natalie. He paused. Natalie identifies targets and makes them vulnerable. And you think you were just another target? Alexander asked. Victor nodded. One that didn't work out as planned. They expected a failing contractor they could bleed dry and discard. Instead, they found someone who built something valuable, something they now want a piece of. Alexander leaned forward. I'm with you, whatever you need. But let's be smart about this. What exactly do you have in mind? Victor opened his laptop, displaying a complex flowchart. I've mapped out their vulnerabilities, connections, and pressure points. Each of them has something to lose beyond money, reputation, freedom, relationships. We exploit those vulnerabilities systematically. Starting with Brett Sullivan, Victor replied. He's the weakest link. No family connections to protect him, a new job hanging by a thread, and a hidden relationship with Natalie he's desperate to preserve. The next day, Brett Sullivan arrived at his new office, a small marketing firm that had hired him despite the scandal at his previous company. Before he could even set down his briefcase, his phone rang. The caller ID showed unknown. Hello. Brett answered warily. Mr. Sullivan, Victor's voice came through clearly. I hope you're settling into your new position. Brett's face hardened. What do you want, Hargrove? Just checking in, Victor replied pleasantly. I understand congratulations are in order. New job, new lakefront property. You've been busy. Brett froze. I don't know what you're talking about. The cabin on Lake Minnetonka. Lovely area. Though it's interesting you put it in your brother Michael's name. Tax purposes, perhaps. Brett's voice dropped to a whisper. How did you? I know everything, Brett, Victor interrupted. The cabin. The joint account with Natalie. The $120,000 you've been accumulating, money taken from my accounts. I even know about the plans you made to leave once the divorce was finalized. That's none of your business, Brett hissed. Actually, it is. That money belongs to me, and I want it back. All of it. Brett laughed nervously. Or what? You'll tell your divorce attorney? Go ahead. Natalie will still get half of your millions. I'm not concerned with what Natalie gets from the divorce, Victor stated calmly. I'm concerned with what she and her family have already taken. Return the money by the end of the week, or I'll be forced to take action. Is that a threat? Brett demanded. It's a courtesy, Victor replied. One I'm not obligated to extend. After ending the call, Brett immediately called Natalie, who was staying with her parents. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Panicking, he tried Douglas Prescott's number. Sullivan. Douglas answered coldly. The Prescotts had been cool toward Brett since the revelation of the affair and the subsequent loss of Natalie's claim to Victor's fortune. He knows about the cabin, Brett blurted, and the money. He wants it all back by the end of the week. A long silence followed. Come to the house, Douglas finally said. Use the back entrance. We need to discuss this privately. That evening, the Prescotts and Brett gathered in Douglas's wood-paneled study. The atmosphere was tense, accusatory. You assured me the cabin purchase couldn't be traced, Douglas snapped at Brett. It shouldn't have been, Brett defended. We used cash. The deed is in Michael's name. There's no paper trail connecting it to us. Obviously there is, Patricia interjected, her voice brittle with anger. The question is, what else does he know? Trent, pacing nervously, stopped suddenly. Does he know about the other accounts? The ones for after the divorce. Douglas shot his son a warning look, but the damage was done. What other accounts? Brett asked, looking between them. Nothing that concerns you. Douglas replied dismissively. The immediate issue is this threat from Victor. We need to determine how serious it is. It sounded very serious, Brett insisted. He wasn't angry or emotional. He was cold, calculated. He's bluffing, Douglas declared. He has no proof of where that money came from. It could have been Natalie's savings, gifts from us, anything. Natalie, who had been silent until now, looked up. What if he's not bluffing? What if he goes to the police? With what? Douglas scoffed. Allegations that his soon-to-be ex-wife and her boyfriend bought property together? That's not illegal. The money might be, Natalie said quietly, if he can prove I took it from our accounts without his knowledge. A heavy silence fell over the room. Then we need leverage, Douglas finally said. Something to make him back off. I have an idea, Trent offered, a malicious glint in his eye. Victor cares about his reputation, right? His precious business? What if something happened to damage that? What are you suggesting? Douglas asked, eyeing his son with newfound interest. A whisper campaign, Trent explained. Rumors about how he really got that buyout deal. Suggestions of insider trading, bribery, cutting corners on projects. That won't work, Brett objected. The construction industry knows and respects Victor. No one would believe it. They would if it came from a credible source, Trent countered. Like a banking executive with connections throughout the financial industry. He looked meaningfully at his father. Douglas stroked his chin thoughtfully. It could work. Nothing direct, nothing actionable, just concerns raised in the right ears. Enough to make Meridian nervous about their acquisition. And if they get nervous enough, Trent continued, they might delay payments, request additional audits, even try to back out of the deal. Which would give us leverage, Douglas concluded with a cold smile. What none of them realized was that their entire conversation was being recorded by devices Frank Donovan had planted throughout the Prescott home days earlier. Miles away, Victor listened as his enemies plotted against him, a thin smile playing on his lips. Predictable, he murmured to himself. Every single one of them. Chapter 6. Countermoves. The next morning, Douglas Prescott arrived at First National Bank, where he served as executive vice president. He nodded curtly to the security guard, rode the elevator to the executive floor, and walked briskly to his corner office. As he settled behind his mahogany desk, his assistant knocked lightly on the door. Mr. Prescott? The board has called an emergency meeting. They're waiting in the conference room. Douglas frowned. What meeting? There's nothing on my calendar. It was just called, sir. They said it's urgent. Straightening his tie, Douglas made his way to the conference room, mentally reviewing any issues that might require emergency attention. When he entered, the entire board of directors sat around the table, along with the bank's general counsel and a man Douglas didn't recognize. Douglas, the chairman, William Foster, said gravely, "Please take a seat." As Douglas sat, Foster gestured to the stranger. "This is Special Agent Richard Calloway with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit." Douglas felt the blood drain from his face, but maintained his composure. "What's this about, William?" Foster slid a folder across the table. "The FBI has presented us with evidence of serious ethical breaches, possibly criminal actions, involving several of our high-net-worth clients." Douglas opened the folder to find documentation of exactly what Frank Donovan had described to Victor, evidence of how Douglas had helped wealthy clients hide assets during divorces, including detailed records of transactions, offshore accounts, and communications. "This is absurd," Douglas blustered. "These are legitimate financial services for our clients." Agent Calloway leaned forward. "Mr. Prescott, we have recordings of you explicitly discussing how to hide assets from divorce courts. That's not a legitimate financial service. It's conspiracy to commit fraud." "Recordings?" Douglas echoed, his voice weak. "From your own office," Calloway confirmed. "Apparently, someone has been documenting your activities for some time." Douglas's mind raced. Victor had moved faster and more aggressively than anticipated. Foster cleared his throat. "Douglas, the board has voted to place you on administrative leave pending a full investigation. We've also frozen your accounts with the bank as a precautionary measure." "You can't do that," Douglas protested. "I've been with this institution for 27 years. "Which makes this betrayal all the more disappointing," Foster replied coldly. "Security will escort you to your office to collect personal items and then off the premises." As Douglas was led away, his phone buzzed with a text. It was from Trent. "Dad, something's wrong. Men in suits are in my apartment. They're asking about gambling debts and bank records." Across town, Natalie sat at her divorce attorney's office, growing increasingly frustrated. "What do you mean, take the offer?" she demanded. "It's insulting. $500,000 after 9 years of marriage to a man worth $14 million. Eleanor Blackwell, a veteran divorce attorney, sighed. "Natalie, you need to understand your position. The evidence of infidelity is overwhelming. The judge will see the text messages, the hotel receipts, the photographs. You were photographed entering hotels with Brett Sullivan on at least 12 occasions during your marriage." "But Minnesota is a no-fault divorce state," Natalie argued. "Infidelity shouldn't matter. For filing, no. But for asset division, judges have discretion. And your husband's attorney has filed a separate civil claim for theft regarding the $120,000 you and Mr. Sullivan accumulated." Natalie paled. "That's my money too." "Not according to the documentation," Eleanor replied flatly. "The withdrawals came from accounts in your husband's name only, not your joint accounts. He has bank records showing you transferred money without authorization. So I should just accept being left with nothing?" Natalie asked bitterly. $500,000 is hardly nothing, Eleanor pointed out. "And given the circumstances, it's a generous offer. If this goes to court, you could easily end up with less and possibly face criminal charges." Natalie's phone rang, Brett calling for the third time that hour. She ignored it, only to have it immediately ring again with her mother's number. "I have to take this," she told her attorney, stepping into the hallway. "Mom? What's wrong?" Patricia's voice was tight with panic. "It's all falling apart, Natalie. Your father's been suspended from a bank. The FBI is investigating him. Trent is being questioned about gambling debts. And there are reporters outside our house asking about charity funds." "What? How is this happening?" "It's Victor," Patricia hissed. "He's behind all of it. He's destroying our family." As Natalie ended the call, she saw Brett approaching down the hallway, his face ashen. "We need to talk," he said urgently. "Right now." They found an empty conference room. Brett paced nervously while Natalie watched him. "I've been fired. Again," he announced. "Someone sent my new company a video." "What video?" Natalie asked, dread building. Brett couldn't meet her eyes. "Us. In the hotel, discussing plans. Natalie sank into a chair. What plans specifically? How we would get half of Victor's money in the divorce. How we claim emotional abuse. He trailed off. How we'd what, Brett? How we considered planting evidence if necessary, he finished quietly. Natalie covered her face with her hands. We were just talking, venting. We never actually did anything. Intent matters, Brett said hollowly. And it's all there on video. With audio. Natalie looked up sharply. How did he get video from our hotel room? Brett laughed bitterly. Does it matter? He has it. Just like he has evidence of the money you took, the cabin we bought, everything. He's 10 steps ahead of us, and he's not stopping. What do we do? Brett sat heavily across from her. I'm leaving. Today. My brother agreed to sell the cabin. At a loss, but it's cash we need. I've booked a flight to Phoenix tonight. My cousin has a construction company there. He'll give me work. You're running away? Natalie asked incredulously. I'm surviving, Brett corrected. Victor's not after my money or my reputation. He's after complete destruction. I'm getting out while I can. And what about me? Natalie demanded. What about us? Brett looked at her with pity. There is no us anymore, Natalie. There can't be. Not with Victor hellbent on revenge. I'm sorry, but you're on your own. As Brett walked out, Natalie felt her carefully constructed world collapsing. Her lover was abandoning her. Her family was under investigation. Her divorce settlement was evaporating. And her husband, the man she had dismissed as weak and unambitious, was methodically dismantling everything and everyone she cared about. She took out her phone with trembling hands and dialed Victor's number. After 4 rings, he answered. Hello, Natalie. Please, she whispered. Please stop this. A long pause followed. Stop what exactly? You know what? The investigations. The recordings. All of it. You've made your point. Have I? Victor's voice was calm, almost curious. And what point would that be? That you're powerful. That you can hurt us. That you're not the pushover we thought you were. Another pause. That's not the point at all, Natalie. The point is consequences. Actions have them. Yours. Your father's. Brett's. All of you made choices, and now you're experiencing the results. What do you want? She asked desperately. Money? I'll give back every cent. The cabin? Brett's selling it already. Just tell me what it will take to end this. It's not about what I want, Victor replied. It's about what you all deserve. And we've barely begun to explore that question. The line went dead, leaving Natalie staring at her phone in horror. For the first time, she truly understood what Victor had become. Not a wronged husband seeking recompense, but an avenging force determined to mete out justice as he saw fit. And there was nothing she could do to stop him. Chapter 7. COLLAPS. 1 month after Victor's revelations, the Prescott family gathered once again. Not in their elegant home, but in a small apartment Natalie had rented on the outskirts of Minneapolis. The luxury and privilege they had taken for granted had vanished with stunning swiftness. Douglas sat hunched in a folding chair, aged beyond his years. The FBI investigation had expanded to include several of his clients, all of whom had eagerly turned on him to save themselves. First National Bank had terminated him after an internal audit uncovered even more ethical violations. His accounts remained frozen, his reputation in tatters. Patricia paced nervously, checking her phone every few minutes. The charity boards she had once dominated had all requested her resignation after anonymous tips led to investigations of financial irregularities. The country club had revoked the Prescott's membership. Former friends no longer returned her calls. Trent slouched on Natalie's second-hand couch, nursing a bruised jaw, a warning from his gambling creditors, who had grown impatient after his father's fall from grace eliminated their hope of easy payment. It's been a month, Douglas said hoarsely. A month of hell. When does it end? It doesn't, Natalie replied, setting cups of cheap coffee before them. Not until he's satisfied. And when will that be? Patricia demanded. When we're all in prison. When we've lost everything. He said it was about consequences, Natalie explained, her voice hollow. About getting what we deserve. And who is he to decide what we deserve? Douglas exploded, then winced as pain shot through his chest. The stress had triggered angina attacks. adding medical bills to their mounting troubles. He's the man we underestimated, Natalie answered simply. The man we humiliated and betrayed. The man who built something valuable while we were planning to take it from him. Trent looked up, his eyes bloodshot. There has to be a way to fight back. Everyone has vulnerabilities. Not Victor, Natalie said. Not anymore. He's liquidated most of his assets. He's protected his business interests through a complex network of LLCs. He's even donated a significant portion to charity. Actual charity, not the kind of skimming Mother did. What about Alexander? Douglas suggested. His business partner. Could we get to Victor through him? Natalie shook her head. Alexander is as ruthless as Victor now. Besides, they've been friends since college. He's the godfather to Alexander's children. So we just give up? Patricia asked, her voice cracking. Except that he's destroyed us? Maybe, Natalie said quietly. Or maybe there's one last option. What? Douglas asked eagerly. Natalie looked at each of them in turn. The truth. Complete honesty. About everything. Are you insane? Trent sputtered. Dad could go to prison. We're already losing everything, Natalie pointed out. Our money, our status, our reputations. At least with the truth, there's a chance for, I don't know, not forgiveness, but perhaps an end. Absolutely not, Douglas declared. We admit nothing. Before Natalie could respond, a knock came at the apartment door. She approached cautiously and checked the peephole, then stepped back in shock. It's Victor, she whispered. The Prescotts froze, exchanging panic glances. After a moment's hesitation, Natalie opened the door. Victor stood in the hallway, immaculately dressed in a tailored suit. Behind him stood Frank Donovan and another man none of them recognized. May we come in? Victor asked politely, as if this were a social call. Wordlessly, Natalie stepped aside. Victor entered, surveying the modest apartment with its mismatched furniture and bare walls, a far cry from the luxury the Prescotts had once enjoyed. Victor, Douglas began, struggling to his feet. We need to... Sit down, Douglas, Victor interrupted calmly. You look unwell. Douglas sank back into his chair, deflated. Allow me to introduce my associates, Victor continued. You've never met Frank Donovan, but he's been an integral part of your lives recently. He's responsible for the recordings, the photographs, the financial documentation. Very thorough. Frank nodded once, his expression impassive. And this, Victor gestured to the other man, is Howard Kleinman, Assistant U.S. Attorney for the District of Minnesota. The Prescotts' collective intake of breath was audible. Why is he here? Patricia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Kleinman has been reviewing the evidence against Douglas, Victor explained. The fraud, the conspiracy, the ethical violations. Enough to send him to federal prison for 12 to 15 years. Douglas went pale. Victor, please. I'm not finished, Victor cut him off. Mr. Kleinman has also been examining Patricia's misappropriation of charitable funds, and Trent's complicity in several of his father's schemes, as well as certain questionable loans processed through First National. The Prescotts sat in stunned silence as Victor continued. Mr. Kleinman is prepared to file charges against all of you. Multiple felony counts. The evidence is overwhelming, and the U.S. Attorney's Office is confident of convictions. Why are you telling us this? Natalie asked. To gloat. Victor turned to her, his expression unreadable. No, Natalie. I'm offering an alternative. He reached into his suit jacket and removed a thick document, placing it on the coffee table. What is this? Douglas asked warily. A cooperation agreement. Howard Kleinman spoke for the first time. In exchange for full disclosure of all financial crimes committed by Douglas Prescott and his associates, the government will recommend reduced sentences. Reduced to what? Douglas demanded. For you, 3 to 5 years instead of 12 to 15, Kleinman replied. For Patricia and Trent, probation and community service instead of prison time. Provided you make full restitution to the defrauded parties, of course. Douglas looked at Victor with naked hatred. You're forcing us to confess. I'm giving you a choice, Victor corrected him. Prison for most of your remaining life, or a few years followed by a chance to rebuild. A harsh consequence, certainly, but not as harsh as it could be. And what about me? Natalie asked quietly. What's my punishment? Victor turned to her. You've already lost your marriage, your lover, your status, and your financial security. The civil judgment for the stolen funds has emptied your remaining accounts. I consider our business concluded. Natalie nodded slowly, understanding the finality in his voice. You have 24 hours to decide, Kleiman said, standing. The offer expires then. As Victor and his associates prepare to leave, Douglas surged to his feet, his face contorted with rage. You smug bastard, he snarled. You think this makes you better than us? You're just as cruel, just as vindictive. Victor paused at the door. The difference, Douglas, is that I never pretended to be anything else. You built your life on appearances, on looking down on others while hiding your own corruption. I simply revealed who you truly are. With that, he left, the door closing quietly behind him. The Prescotts sat in silence for several minutes, the cooperation agreement lying untouched on the table between them. Finally, Natalie spoke. He's right, about all of us. We judged him, mocked him, betrayed him, while hiding our own ugliness. Douglas glared at her. Save your philosophical epiphanies. We need to decide what to do about this. He jabbed a finger at the document. There's nothing to decide, Natalie said firmly. You'll sign it. You'll cooperate. You'll serve your time. How dare you, Douglas began. No, Natalie interrupted, standing up. How dare you? How dare all of you? You raised me to believe I deserved more than Victor could give me. You encouraged me to cheat, to steal, to lie. And now we're all paying the price. She picked up the cooperation agreement. Sign it, Dad. It's over. Victor won. Chapter 8, Atonement. 6 months later, Victor sat in the visitors area of the Federal Correctional Institution in Duluth, waiting. The room was sparse but clean, filled with other visitors, mostly women and children seeing husbands and fathers. Victor was one of the few men visiting another man. Douglas Prescott entered in his prison uniform, the orange fabric hanging loosely on his frame. He had lost weight, and his formerly imperious posture was gone, replaced by the cautious movements of a man who had learned the hard way that he was no longer in control. When he spotted Victor, Douglas hesitated, then approached slowly and sat across from him at the small table. I didn't think you'd actually come, Douglas said, his voice raspier than Victor remembered. I said I would, Victor replied simply. They sat in uncomfortable silence for a moment before Douglas spoke again. If you came for an apology, you're wasting your time. Victor shook his head. I don't need your apology, Douglas. I know you're not sorry for what you did, only for getting caught. Douglas's jaw tightened. Then why are you here? To give you this, Victor said, sliding a folder across the table. The transcript of my conversation with Patricia yesterday. Douglas opened the folder cautiously, scanning the contents. As he read, his expression shifted from suspicion to shock. She's cooperating with the charity investigation, he murmured, telling them everything. Yes, Victor confirmed. In exchange for probation instead of prison time. She'll still have to make restitution, of course. Douglas looked up, his eyes narrow. And you arranged this? I presented the option. She made the choice. Why? Douglas demanded. Why help her after everything? Victor considered the question. Because unlike you, Patricia is actually remorseful. Not just for getting caught, but for the harm she caused. She's agreed to work with the charities to implement proper financial controls, to prevent others from doing what she did. And what about Trent? Have you helped him too? The bitterness in Douglas's voice was unmistakable. Trent's gambling debts have been settled, Victor stated. He's in a residential treatment program for his addiction. Upon completion, he'll serve 2 years probation and work in a community financial literacy program, teaching others to avoid his mistakes. Douglas stared at Victor in disbelief. I don't understand you. First, you destroy us. Now you're what? Saving us. Not saving, Victor corrected, allowing the possibility of redemption. There's a difference. And Natalie? Douglas asked, what redemption have you offered her? Something hardened in Victor's expression. None. Natalie made her choices with full awareness of their meaning. The others followed your lead, but she acted from her own selfish desires. Her consequences stand. Douglas nodded slowly, processing this information. So I'm the only one who goes to prison. You're the architect of the family's moral collapse, Victor said bluntly. The one who taught them that rules don't apply to Prescott's. That appearances matter more than integrity. That wealth and status justify any action. 3 years seems appropriate. Douglas was silent for a long moment, staring at his hands on the table. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, stripped of its usual arrogance. She's my daughter. Whatever she did to you, whatever person she became, I shaped her. That's on me. For the first time since entering the prison, Victor saw something genuine in Douglas Prescott. Not remorse for his crimes, perhaps, but recognition of his failure as a father. Yes, Victor agreed softly. It is. The two men sat in silence again, but the quality of it had changed. Not comfortable, not friendly, but honest in a way their previous interactions had never been. What happens after? Douglas finally asked. When I get out? That depends on you, Victor replied. Your former clients have been notified of your conviction. Your professional licenses have been revoked. The financial industry in Minneapolis knows exactly who and what you are. Douglas nodded grimly. So, I'm unemployable. In finance, yes, Victor confirmed. But I've established a foundation that works with former white-collar offenders, helping them find legitimate employment after prison. You'd qualify for the program. Douglas stared at him in confusion. Why would you do that? After everything. Victor leaned forward. Because revenge wasn't my goal, Douglas. Justice was. And true justice includes the possibility of redemption, even for people like you. As their time came to an end, Douglas stood to return to his cell. But before leaving, he asked one final question. Do you ever regret it? How far you went? Victor considered this carefully before answering. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that your family was so determined to take what wasn't theirs that only severe consequences would stop them. But do I regret protecting what I built? No, never. Douglas nodded once, accepting this answer, then turned and walked away, back to the prison wing, where he would spend the next 3 years contemplating the choices that had led him there. As Victor watched him go, he felt no satisfaction, no joy in the man's downfall. Only a grim recognition that sometimes justice required hard choices and harsher consequences. Chapter 9. Renaissance. 1 year later, Victor stood on the observation deck of the newly completed Hargrove Tower. The Minneapolis skyline spread out below him. The 50-story building represented his evolution from contractor to developer, from builder to visionary. After the sale of his construction company, he had invested a significant portion of his fortune in urban development projects, focusing on mixed-use buildings that combined affordable housing with commercial spaces. Quite a view, Alexander commented, joining him at the railing. Worth every penny and headache. Victor nodded, surveying his creation with quiet pride. The residential units are fully leased. The commercial spaces are at 80% occupancy, and the rooftop garden opens to the public next month. Speaking of the public, Alexander said carefully, have you seen the latest article? He handed Victor a copy of the Minneapolis Business Journal. The headline read, From Construction to Philanthropy, Victor Hargrove's Unexpected Journey. Victor skimmed the article, which detailed his various charitable initiatives over the past year. The reentry program for former white-collar criminals, the scholarship fund for trade school students, the urban development projects aimed at revitalizing struggling neighborhoods. They make me sound like a saint, Victor noted dryly. Hardly, Alexander chuckled. But they're not wrong about the impact you're having. Victor handed the magazine back. Impact was always the goal, building something that lasts. They stood in companionable silence for a moment before Alexander spoke again. Have you heard from Natalie? Victor shook his head. Not since the divorce was finalized. Last I heard, she'd moved to Chicago. Started over. And you're okay with that? No more consequences? Her family shattered. Her lover abandoned her. Her reputation and social standing destroyed. Her share of the divorce settlement barely covered her legal fees. Victor shrugged. She's living with the consequences of her choices. That's enough. Alexander studied his friend. You've changed. Have I? Victor asked, genuinely curious. You're lighter somehow. The anger that drove you after discovering her betrayal, it's gone. Victor considered this. Not gone. Transformed. I channeled it into something productive instead of destructive. As they turned to leave the observation deck, Victor's phone rang. The screen displayed a name he hadn't expected to see, Douglas Prescott. I should take this, he told Alexander, who nodded and stepped away to give him privacy. Douglas, Victor answered. I didn't expect to hear from you until your release next year. I'm calling about Patricia, Douglas said without preamble, his voice tight with emotion. She's been diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. Victor closed his eyes briefly. I'm sorry to hear that. Is she receiving treatment? Trying to, Douglas replied. But her health insurance won't cover the specialist she needs. And with the restitution payments, there's no money for private care. Victor understood what wasn't being said. What are her doctors recommending? A surgical oncologist at Mayo Clinic. Dr. Winters. He has a new approach that could help, but there's a 6-month waiting list for new patients. I see, Victor said quietly. And you're calling me because... Douglas sighed heavily. Because you're the only person with both the resources and the connections who might help. Despite everything. Victor was silent for a long moment. I'll make some calls. Dr. Winters is on the board of one of my foundations. Thank you, Douglas said, the words clearly difficult for him. I know you have no reason to help us. I'm not doing it for you, Douglas, Victor clarified, or even for Patricia. I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do, something your family never quite understood. After ending the call, Victor walked to the edge of the observation deck again, looking out over the city he had helped shape. So much had changed in 2 years, his marriage, his business, his understanding of himself. The revenge he had executed against the Prescotts had been calculated and thorough, but it hadn't brought him the satisfaction he'd expected. Only when he began channeling his resources into creation rather than destruction did he find something resembling peace. His phone buzzed with a text from Dominic Weathers, his attorney. The Prescott cooperation has led to 3 more indictments. Ripple effects of your justice. Victor smiled slightly. Justice, not revenge. The distinction mattered. As the sun began to set over Minneapolis, casting long shadows across the cityscape, Victor thought about the words he had whispered to Natalie on that pivotal day when the check was presented, the words that had made her collapse. I've known about Brett for months. I've documented everything. And I promise you, by the time I'm done, you'll have nothing and no one. He had fulfilled that promise. The Prescotts had been exposed, Brett had fled, and Natalie had lost everything she valued. Victor had orchestrated their downfall with the same meticulous attention to detail he brought to his construction projects. But somewhere along the way, destruction had ceased to satisfy him. He had begun to build again. Not just buildings, but opportunities, programs, futures for people who needed second chances. Not because he had forgiven those who betrayed him, but because he refused to let their betrayal define him. The elevator door opened behind him, and Frank Donovan stepped onto the observation deck. Beautiful evening, Frank commented, joining Victor at the railing. It is, Victor agreed. How's the foundation work going? Frank had transitioned from private investigator to director of Victor's reentry program, using his skills to vet participants and create security protocols. Douglas Prescott's application came through today, Frank said, for post-release employment. Victor nodded. I expected that. And he's qualified. His cooperation led to significant prosecutions, and his work in the prison library has been exemplary. Frank hesitated. But given your history with him, I wanted to consult you before proceeding. Victor considered the irony of Douglas Prescott seeking help from the very foundation created by the man he had once treated with such disdain. Life had a way of coming full circle. Process the application, Victor decided. Standard procedures. No special treatment, good or bad. Frank nodded, understanding. And if he succeeds in the program? Then he rebuilds his life on different terms than before. That was always the point. As Frank left, Alexander returned, carrying 2 glasses of whiskey. He handed one to Victor. To Hargrove Tower, Alexander proposed, raising his glass. And to whatever comes next. Victor clinked his glass against his friend's. To building instead of breaking. They drank in silence, watching as the city lights began to twinkle in the growing darkness. Victor thought about the journey that had brought him here, from sleeping on the couch during his in-laws' visit to standing atop a building bearing his name. From a husband dismissed as a disappointment to a man who had remade himself and, in the process, helped remake parts of his city. The Prescotts had underestimated him, as had Natalie and Brett. They had mistaken his patience for weakness, his restraint for lack of ambition. They never understood that while they focused on appearances, on status, on what others thought of them, Victor had been building something real, something that would outlast all of them. He hadn't forgiven their betrayal. He never would. But he had moved beyond it, channeling the cold fury that once drove him into a more constructive force. Not because he was virtuous or magnanimous, but because he had learned that true power lay not in destruction, but in creation. As night fell completely over Minneapolis, Victor finished his whiskey and turned away from the view. Tomorrow would bring new projects, new challenges, new opportunities to build. The past, with all its betrayals and lessons, was firmly behind him. He had prevailed, not just by breaking those who had wronged him, but by refusing to become what they were, people whose lives were defined by taking rather than creating, by appearance rather than substance. That was the truest revenge of all. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Soldier's Heart. Master Sergeant Michael Edwards crouched behind a crumbling wall in Kandahar, his rifle trained on a suspected Taliban compound 300 meters out. The Afghan sun beat down mercilessly, but Mike's focus never wavered. 22 years of military service had honed him into a weapon of precision and discipline. At 45, Mike commanded respect from every soldier under him. His steel-gray eyes had seen 3 tours in Iraq and 4 in Afghanistan. His weathered hands bore scars from IEDs and firefights, but his mind remained sharp as the K-bar knife strapped to his thigh. "Edwards, you've got mail," whispered Corporal Friedman, sliding up beside him with a satellite phone. Mike didn't move his scope. "Not now, Carl. We're 30 seconds from go time. It's from stateside, Sarge. The Red Cross." Those words made Mike's blood freeze. Red Cross calls Mint family emergencies. His daughter Hope was 17, living with his ex-wife Megan in Portland. They divorced 5 years ago when Megan couldn't handle the deployments anymore. Mike had fought for custody but lost. A decorated war hero was apparently less suitable than a mother who provided stability. "Take over the scope," Mike ordered, accepting the phone. The mission had been Mike's baby for weeks. Intelligence suggested a high-value target was meeting here tonight. But as he pressed the phone to his ear, everything else faded away. "Michael Edwards?" The voice was crisp, professional. "Speaking. This is Nancy Williams from Portland General Hospital. Your daughter Hope Edwards was admitted 3 hours ago with severe injuries. Your ex-wife listed you as emergency contact." Mike's trained composure cracked. "What kind of injuries?" "Severe cranial trauma, internal bleeding, multiple facial fractures. She's stable but critical. You need to know, this wasn't an accident." Before Mike could respond, another voice broke through. Megan, sobbing hysterically. "Mike? Oh God, Mike, you have to come home. He almost killed her. Terrence almost killed our baby. Terrence McFarland." Mike's jaw clenched. Megan's boyfriend for the past year, a 2-time felon with a drinking problem. Mike had run his background when they started dating. Assault charges, domestic violence, all dropped when victims refused to testify. "What happened?" Mike's voice was deadly calm. She refused to." Megan's words dissolved into sobs. "He wanted her to do things. When she said no, he beat her unconscious." "Mike, there's so much blood." The phone crackled, and suddenly his squad leader's voice cut through. "Edwards, whatever you're dealing with can wait. We've got movement in the compound. But Mike was already standing, his rifle lowered. George, I need immediate extraction. Negative. This operation. My daughter's dying. Mike's voice carried 22 years of unwavering service. And the man who did it is walking free. Lieutenant Colonel George Denton had served with Mike in Iraq. He'd seen him charge in a gunfire to save wounded soldiers, had watched him carry 3 men to safety during an ambush in Fallujah. George knew that tone. How bad? Skull fracture. Internal bleeding. Some animal tried to rape her and beat her half to death when she fought back. The radio fell silent for long moments. Then, Black Ops chopper will be at your location in 20. Make it rain, Mike. As Mike gathered his gear, Corporal Friedman grabbed his arm. Sarge, you sure about this? You're throwing away your pension, maybe facing court-martial. Mike's gray eyes were ice cold. Carl, I've spent 22 years fighting monsters overseas. Time I dealt with the one in my own backyard. Chapter 2. The Beast Revealed. The helicopter ride to Bagram Air Base passed in a blur. Mike's mind raced through tactical scenarios, but one image kept surfacing. Hope at 12, teaching him to braid her hair before a father-daughter dance. She'd grown up beautiful and strong, despite the divorce. Despite his absence. The military transport to Portland gave him 8 hours to plan. Mike called his old friend Abel Thompson, now Portland PD detective, from the plane. Mike? Jesus, I heard about Hope. I'm sorry, brother. Tell me about Terrence McFarland. Abel's voice hardened. Piece of work. Real name's Terrence McFarland Sullivan. Took his stepfather's name to dodge warrants. We've been watching him for months. Word is he's connected to a dog-fighting ring. Runs numbers for some nasty people. Charges? Nothing that stuck. 3 domestic violence calls, 2 sexual assault allegations, 1 attempted murder. Victims all clammed up or disappeared. Mike absorbed this. He's still at large. Walking free. Megan won't press charges, says she's scared. Hospital called it in, but without witnesses or her testimony. I need everything you have on him. Addresses, associates, weaknesses. Mike, whatever you're thinking. I'm thinking my 17-year-old daughter has a fractured skull because some animal thinks he can do whatever he wants to women. Mike's voice was surgical steel. I'm thinking someone needs to teach him otherwise. Abel was quiet for a moment. I'll have a file waiting. Portland General's ICU was sterile and bright, but Mike barely noticed. Hope lay unconscious, her beautiful face swollen beyond recognition. Purple bruises covered her cheekbones, her lip was split, and her left eye was sealed shut. Tubes and wires connected her to machines that beeped steadily. Megan sat beside the bed, looking 10 years older than her 41 years. When she saw Mike, she collapsed into his arms. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I should have listened when you said he was dangerous. I should have protected her. Mike held her, but his eyes never left Hope. Tell me exactly what happened. Megan's voice was hollow. I was at work. Hope came home early from school. Some club meeting was canceled. She texted me that Terrence was there, acting weird. He'd been drinking. Then what? He cornered her in the kitchen. Started saying how pretty she was, how she was becoming a real woman. When she tried to leave, he grabbed her. Mike's hands slowly clenched into fists. Continue. She fought him off and ran to her room, locked the door. But he kicked it in. She called 911, but he ripped the phone away. Megan's voice broke. The neighbors heard screaming. When they called police, it was already over. Where was he when police arrived? Gone. Just vanished. Mike studied Hope's chart. Concussion, orbital fracture, internal bleeding from kidney damage, defensive wounds on her hands and arms. She'd fought hard. Dr. Phillips, a kind-faced woman in her 50s, approached them. Mr. Edwards? I'm Hope's attending physician. How is she? Stable but serious. The brain swelling has decreased, which is encouraging. She regained consciousness briefly an hour ago. Asked for her father. Mike's throat tightened. Will she recover fully? Physically, yes. The psychological trauma. Dr. Phillips hesitated. That'll take time. She's a strong girl, Mr. Edwards. But what she endured would break most adults. That night, Mike sat beside Hope's bed as she slept fitfully. Every beep of the monitors reminded him of his failure. He'd been hunting terrorists halfway around the world while a predator stalked his daughter in her own home. Hope's eyes fluttered open around midnight. When she saw him, tears began flowing. "Daddy." Her voice was barely a whisper through her damaged throat. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere." He said you'd never know. That's soldiers like you don't care about their families. Mike gently took her unbandaged hand. "Hope, listen to me. What happened to you will never happen again. I promise you that. But he's still out there, Daddy. What if he comes back?" Mike's gray eyes were gentle, but absolutely certain. "He won't be a problem much longer, baby girl. Daddy's going to make sure of that." Chapter 3. Gathering Intelligence. The next morning, Mike met Abel Thompson at a diner across from police headquarters. Abel slid a thick folder across the table with their coffee. "Everything's in there," Abel said quietly. "But Mike, officially, I never gave you this." The file painted a picture of systematic predation. Terrence McFarland Sullivan, 34, had been escalating for years. 3 girlfriends hospitalized, 2 teenage sisters who'd accused him of assault before their family suddenly moved out of state. He owned a body shop that was clearly a front. Overhead too high, customer base too small. He's connected, Mike observed, studying surveillance photos. The Navarro family. Josh Navarro runs half the underground action in Portland. Terrence does enforcement, breaks legs, intimidates witnesses. Mike found what he was looking for on page 12. Terrence lived in a converted warehouse in an industrial district. Isolated, minimal police presence, perfect for what Mike had in mind. "There's something else," Abel continued. "Megan's not the first mother whose kid he's targeted. 2 years ago, a woman named Brandy Wade called in a domestic. Her 15-year-old daughter claimed Terrence assaulted her. What happened? Brandy dropped charges after her car was firebombed. Family moved to Seattle the next week." Mike memorized the warehouse layout from city planning documents. 3 stories, reinforced concrete, minimal windows. Terrence had turned the first floor into a garage, lived on the second, used the third for storage, likely Navarro's illegal operations. That afternoon, Mike conducted reconnaissance. The warehouse sat at the end of a dead-end street, surrounded by abandoned buildings. Perfect for containment. He noted security cameras, but they were old, poorly positioned. Terrence was either arrogant or stupid. From a building across the street, Mike watched through binoculars as Terrence returned home. He was bigger than Mike expected, 6'3", maybe 240, built like a linebacker gone soft. Prison tattoos covered his arms, and he moved with the swagger of someone who'd never faced real consequences. Mike's phone buzzed. Text from Hope. "Daddy, when are you coming back?" He typed carefully with one thumb. "Soon, sweetheart. Rest and get strong. I love you, Daddy. I love you too, baby girl. More than you'll ever know." That evening, Mike visited an old Army buddy, Leonard Lancaster, who ran a military surplus store outside Portland. Len took one look at Mike's face and locked the front door. "How bad do you need it?" Len asked, leading Mike to the back room. "Bad enough." Len opened a concealed panel, revealing items not typically available to civilians. Non-lethal or permanent solutions? Mike considered this carefully. Killing Terrence would be easy, but it would destroy his own life and leave Hope without a father. There were better ways to ensure justice. "I need him broken, not dead. At least, not directly." Len nodded and began assembling items. Tactical vest, zip ties, a taser, night vision goggles, and something special, a small device that looked like a garage door opener. GPS tracker with audio pickup, Len explained. "Stick it somewhere he won't find it, and you'll know his every move." Mike spent the rest of the night planning. Terrence's routine was predictable. Work until 6, bar until 10, home to his warehouse. Weekends were wild cards, but weekdays followed a pattern. The plan forming in Mike's mind was complex, requiring precise timing and multiple moving parts. It would take days to execute properly, but when it was finished, Terrence McFarland Sullivan would face something he'd never encountered before: accountability. As Mike reviewed city maps and police patrol schedules, his phone rang. "Hospital number. Mr. Edwards? This is Dr. Phillips. Hope is asking for you. She's having nightmares and won't settle down." Mike was out the door in seconds. As he drove through Portland's empty streets, he thought about justice versus revenge. The law had failed Hope. The system had failed every girl Terrence had hurt. But Mike Edwards had never failed a mission in 22 years of service. He wasn't about to start now. Chapter 4, The Father's Promise. Hope was sitting up when Mike arrived, her good eye wide with terror for whatever nightmare had gripped her. When she saw him, relief flooded her battered features. "He was here," she whispered. "In my dream. He said he was coming back for me." Mike sat beside her bed, his presence immediately calming her racing heart. "Hope, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I've been thinking about what happened, and I have a plan." "What kind of plan?" "The kind that ensures Terrence can never hurt you or anyone else again." Mike's voice was steady, reassuring. "But I need to know everything. Every detail you can remember, no matter how difficult." Hope was quiet for a long moment, then began speaking in a small, determined voice. She told him about Terrence's escalating behavior over the past month. Inappropriate comments, accidental touches, walking into her room without knocking. "Mom didn't believe me at first," Hope said. "She said I was being dramatic because I didn't like him." "What changed her mind?" "Last week, she came home early and caught him going through my laundry. He claimed he was just helping with housework, but Mom saw how he was handling my clothes." Mike felt his jaw clench, but kept his expression neutral. "Tell me about yesterday." Hope's account was devastating. Terrence had cornered her in the kitchen, drunk and aggressive. When she tried to call for help, he'd grabbed her phone and thrown it against the wall. The assault that followed was calculated, designed to break her spirit as much as her body. "He kept saying I was just like my mother, that I needed to learn my place," Hope whispered. "When I fought back, he got angrier. Said soldiers' daughters think they're tough, but break just like everyone else." Mike's hand found hers gently. "Hope, you survived. You fought back when a grown man attacked you, and you survived. That makes you stronger than he'll ever be." "But Daddy, what if he comes back? What if he hurts Mom?" "He won't." Mike's voice carried absolute certainty. "I'm going to make sure of that." The next morning, Mike began phase 1 of his operation. He rented a nondescript sedan and followed Terrence to his body shop. The business was exactly what Abel had described, a front for laundering money and intimidating witnesses. Mike watched as Terrence worked, noting his habits, his interactions with customers. Around noon, Josh Navarro arrived in a black Mercedes. Mike used a telephoto lens to photograph their meeting, recording license plates and faces. Through the shop's windows, he could see Terrence showing Navarro stacks of cash. Money from what? Protection rackets? Drug sales? It didn't matter. What mattered was establishing the connection for later use. That afternoon, Mike visited Megan at her real estate office. She looked exhausted, jumping at every unexpected sound. "How is she?" Megan asked immediately. "Stronger than we thought. But Megan, we need to talk about Terrence." Megan's face crumpled. "I know what you're thinking. That this is my fault for bringing him into our lives. This isn't about blame. It's about making sure Hope is safe. The police say they can't do anything without more evidence. Terrence has an alibi, claims he was at the bar all afternoon. The bartender backs him up." Mike wasn't surprised. Fear or money, maybe both, had bought Terrence temporary protection. But Mike had learned long ago that protection was only as strong as the people providing it. "Megan, I need you to do something for me. Tomorrow, take Hope to your sister's house in Seattle. Stay there for 2 weeks." "Why? What are you planning?" Mike looked at his ex-wife, the woman who'd once loved him enough to marry him, who'd given him the most precious thing in his life. "I'm planning to be the father Hope needs me to be." That evening, Mike installed Leonard's GPS tracker on Terrence's truck while he was at Mickey's bar. The device was military-grade, virtually undetectable, and would record audio within a 15-foot radius. Back at his hotel, Mike monitored Terrence's location and conversations through a laptop interface. The man was a creature of habit. Same bar, same booth, same complaints about ungrateful women and disrespectful kids. Around midnight, Terrence left the bar and drove to his warehouse. Mike followed at a distance, using night vision equipment to observe the building's security measures. 3 cameras, motion sensors on the ground floor, but the upper levels were vulnerable. Mike's phone chimed with a text from Hope. "Daddy, Mom says we're going to Aunt Casey's tomorrow. Are you coming too?" Mike typed back, "Not yet, sweetheart. I have some business to finish first, but I'll see you soon. I love you, Daddy. Thank you for believing me." Mike stared at that message for a long time. In 22 years of military service, he'd received commendations, medals, and recognition from generals. But nothing had ever meant more than those simple words from his daughter. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Chapter 5. Setting the Trap. Phase 2 commenced at dawn. Mike positioned himself with a view of Terrence's warehouse, documenting every detail of his routine. The man was punctual, leaving for work at exactly 7:30 a.m., returning for lunch at noon, then staying at the shop until 6 p.m. More importantly, Mike observed Terrence's visitors. Josh Navarro arrived twice during the week, each time carrying a briefcase and leaving with packages from the warehouse's third floor. Other men came and went, enforcers, dealers, the entire structure of a criminal enterprise operating under police radar. Mike's military training had taught him that successful operations required intelligence, timing, and patience. He spent 3 days building a complete picture of Terrence's world, identifying weaknesses and pressure points. The breakthrough came Thursday evening. Through the GPS audio feed, Mike heard Terrence on a phone call that would change everything. "Yeah, boss, I got a message," Terrence was saying. "The Edwards girl? She's not talking to cops, but her old man's back in town. Army guy. So," Josh Navarro's voice was clear through the feed. "So maybe we should send a message. Make sure Daddy Soldier knows what happens to families that cause problems." Mike's blood went cold as Terrence continued. "I still got keys to the ex-wife's place. Could pay another visit, finish what I started with the daughter." "Do what you gotta do," Navarro replied. "But make it clean. We don't need federal heat." Mike immediately called Abel Thompson. "I need you to pick up Josh Navarro for questioning. Tonight. On what grounds?" "I'll provide grounds. Just keep him busy for 48 hours. "Mike, what are you planning?" "Justice, Abel. The kind of courts can't provide." That night, Mike executed Phase 3. Using skills learned in Afghanistan, he infiltrated the warehouse while Terrence was at Mickey's bar. The third-floor storage area contained exactly what Mike expected: stolen merchandise, illegal weapons, and detailed records of Josh Navarro's operations. Mike photographed everything, uploading files to a secure server. But more importantly, he found what would give him leverage: security footage from cameras throughout the warehouse, including one positioned to record Terrence's assault on Hope. The monster had filmed his crime. Mike copied the footage onto multiple drives, then placed cameras of his own throughout the building. When his trap was sprung, he wanted everything documented. By 2 a.m., Mike had transformed the warehouse into a sophisticated surveillance post. Hidden cameras, audio pickups, and motion sensors would track Terrence's every movement. More importantly, Mike had rigged the building's electrical system with military-grade equipment that would give him complete control over lights, locks, and even the heating system. Friday morning brought unexpected complications. Megan called, frantic. "Mike, Hope's having panic attacks. She keeps saying Terrence is going to find us. You're safe in Seattle." "I made sure of that. But for how long? We can't hide forever." Mike understood her fear, but his plan required precision timing. 2 more days, Megan. I promise this ends in 2 more days." "Why aren't you telling me?" "I'm telling you that Hope will never have to fear Terrence McFarland again. That's all you need to know." That afternoon, Abel called with good news. Navarro's in holding. Anonymous tip about stolen vehicles led to a search warrant. "We found enough evidence to keep him busy for weeks." "Perfect. That leaves Terrence isolated and vulnerable." "Mike, I ran the warehouse through our database. That building's been flagged by federal agencies. Whatever you're planning, it's going to draw attention." "Good," Mike said quietly. "I want them to see what happens to animals who hurt children." Friday evening, Mike watched Terrence return from work to find 2 FBI agents waiting at his body shop. They questioned him for an hour about Josh Navarro's operations, leaving him paranoid and angry. Through the audio feed, Mike heard Terrence making desperate phone calls. His protection was gone, his boss was arrested, and he was beginning to understand that his world was collapsing. "Time to close the net," Mike murmured, checking his equipment one final time. Saturday would be Judgment Day. Chapter 6. The Hunt Begins. Saturday dawned gray and cold, perfect weather for what Mike had planned. Terrence slept late, his phone ringing constantly with calls from associates who'd heard about Navarro's arrest. Through the warehouse's hidden cameras, Mike watched him pace like a caged animal. At noon, Terrence made the call Mike had been waiting for. "Mickey? It's Terry. I need you to send someone to Seattle. I got a problem needs handling." Mike immediately contacted Abel. "He's making a move on my family. Time to execute. What do you need?" Complete radio silence on the warehouse district. "Whatever happens tonight, your units stay clear until I give the all clear." "Mike, Abel, this ends tonight, one way or another." At 3 p.m., Mike watched two of Terrence's associates drive towards Seattle in a black SUV. He'd anticipated this move, and Leonard Lancaster was already in position to intercept them. The former Army Ranger would ensure they never reached Megan and Hope. By 6 p.m., Terrence was drinking heavily, his paranoia increasing with each failed phone call. Mike began Phase 4, using the warehouse's rigged electrical system to play psychological warfare. First, the lights began flickering randomly. Then the heating system started cycling on and off, creating unsettling sounds throughout the building. Mike used the hidden speakers to play barely audible sounds, footsteps, whispers, the distant sound of Hope screaming. Through the cameras, Mike watched Terrence's growing panic. The man checked and rechecked locks, drew the curtains, and armed himself with a baseball bat from his truck. At 9 p.m., Mike cut the main power, plunging the warehouse into darkness. Through night vision equipment, he watched Terrence stumble around with a flashlight, calling out challenges to shadows. "Who's there? I know someone's messing with me." Mike used the audio system to project his voice throughout the building. "Hello, Terrence." Terrence spun around, bat raised. "Who is that? Show yourself. You wanted to send men after my daughter. That was a mistake." Recognition dawned on Terrence's face. "Edwards? You're the soldier. Hope's daddy." "That's right. And you hurt my little girl." Mike had positioned himself on the building's roof, accessing the interior through a skylight he'd prepared earlier. He rappelled down on tactical ropes, landing silently in the third-floor shadows. "You can't prove nothing," Terrence called out, his voice cracking. "That little bitch is lying. I don't need to prove anything, Terrence. I have something better." Mike activated a laptop connected to the building's sound system. Hope's screams filled the warehouse, audio from Terrence's own security cameras during the assault. "No, please." Hope's voice echoed off the walls. "Please don't hurt me." Terrence's face went white. He'd forgotten about his own recordings. "Turn it off," he screamed. "Turn it off." But Mike let it play, every moment of Terrence's crime, recorded in perfect digital clarity. The sounds of a 17-year-old girl fighting for her life against a predator twice her size. When the audio ended, Mike's voice returned, calm and controlled. "She fought you, Terrence. A child fought you and survived. Now let's see how you do against some of your own size." Mike dropped through the skylight, landing 20 feet from Terrence with military precision. In his tactical gear, armed with military training and righteous fury, he looked like death incarnate. Terrence swung the bat wildly. Mike caught it mid-swing, twisted it from his hands, and broke it over his knee. "Please," Terrence whimpered. "I can pay you. Whatever you want." "What I want," Mike said quietly, "is for you to understand what my daughter felt when you cornered her in her own home." Chapter 7. Reckoning. Mike moved with calculated precision, herding Terrence toward the warehouse's center where he'd prepared his final stage. The space was lit by military-grade floodlights, powered by portable generators, creating a stark arena of judgment. "Sit down," Mike commanded, indicating a metal chair bolted to the floor. "Look, man, we can work this out," Terrence pleaded, backing away. "I got money. Connections. We can make a deal." "The same deal you offer my daughter?" Mike's taser dropped Terrence instantly. When the convulsions stopped, Mike zip-tied him to the chair, then activated cameras positioned to record everything. "Let me tell you what's going to happen," Mike said, circling his prisoner like a predator. You're going to confess to every crime you've committed, every girl you've hurt, every family you've terrorized. All of it. I ain't saying nothing without a lawyer. Mike smiled coldly and activated a large monitor. Security footage began playing, Terrence assaulting Hope, beating her unconscious, and worse. The timestamp showed the date and time. The location was clearly identifiable. This video is already uploaded to multiple news stations, police departments, and FBI field offices. Mike lied smoothly. The only question is whether you want to control the narrative or let the evidence speak for itself. Terrence's face crumpled as he watched his crimes played back in high definition. You can't do this. I got rights. You forfeited your rights when you put your hands on my daughter. Mike revealed a second monitor showing live feeds from security cameras throughout Portland. I've been watching you for weeks, Terrence. I know about the dogfighting ring, the protection racket, the other girls you've hurt. That's all Navarro's operation. You just rape and terrorize children for money. Mike's voice was ice, like Brandy Wade's daughter. Remember her? 15 years old when you attacked her. Terrence's eyes widened. How do you? I know everything. The question is whether you want to face justice or just disappear. For the next hour, Mike systematically broke down Terrence's psychological defenses. He played audio recordings of the man's own words, showed photos of his victims, detailed evidence of crimes spanning 5 years. Here's what happens next, Mike finally said. You're going to call Detective Thompson and confess to everything. Every assault, every threatened witness, every crime you've committed in Josh Navarro's organization. They'll kill me in prison. Maybe. Or maybe you'll get protective custody and spend the rest of your life in a cell, thinking about the children you hurt. Mike leaned close. Either way, you'll never touch another little girl. Terrence was sobbing now, the tough guy facade completely shattered. Please, I'll leave town. I'll disappear. Just let me go. Like you let Hope go when she begged you to stop. Mike played the audio again, Hope's terrified voice filling the warehouse. This time, Terrence broke completely. Okay, I'll confess. Just make it stop. Mike handed him a phone with Abel Thompson's number already dialed. Start talking. For 30 minutes, Terrence confessed to crimes that would ensure he'd never see freedom again. Sexual assault, witness intimidation, extortion, conspiracy. Abel recorded every word while Mike documented the confession on multiple cameras. When it was finished, Mike cut Terrence's restraints. Portland PD will be here in 10 minutes. You can run, or you can wait for them. Either way, your life as a predator is over. Terrence chose to run, exactly as Mike had predicted. Chapter 8, The Final Gambit. Terrence stumbled from the warehouse into the cold Portland night, his confession already in police hands, but his panic overriding logic. Mike tracked him through the GPS device still hidden on his truck, watching as the desperate man made increasingly erratic decisions. First, Terrence drove to Josh Navarro's house, only to find it surrounded by federal agents. Then he tried 3 different associates, all under surveillance or already arrested as Navarro's organization collapsed. Through intercepted phone calls, Mike heard Terrence's growing desperation. His criminal network was gone, his protection evaporated, and law enforcement was closing in. But Mike wasn't finished yet. At 2 a.m., Terrence made a fatal mistake. Paranoid and sleep-deprived, he decided to flee Portland but needed money first. He broke into his body shop to retrieve cash hidden in a floor safe. Mike was waiting, going somewhere. Mike emerged from the shadows as Terrence stuffed bills into a duffel bag. Terrence spun around, pointing a pistol with shaking hands. Stay back. I'll kill you. With what? The gun you reported stolen 3 months ago. Mike stepped closer, unafraid. The one with no firing pin. Terrence pulled the trigger repeatedly. Click, click, click. I've been watching you for weeks, Mike explained calmly. I know every weapon you own, every hiding place, every escape route. Did you really think I let you keep a functional weapon? Terrence threw the useless gun and lunged with a knife from his workbench. Mike sidestepped easily, using Terrence's momentum to drive him into a concrete wall. The man collapsed, blood streaming from his nose. Here's what I don't understand, Mike said, dragging Terrence to his feet. You attacked a 17-year-old girl. You filmed it. You kept the evidence. What kind of sick mind does that? Please. But I'm grateful you're stupid, Mike continued. Because now everyone will see exactly what you are. Mike activated a tablet, showing news broadcasts from 3 Portland stations. All were running the same story. Warehouse confession. Local man admits to multiple assaults. Terrence's face filled every screen as his recorded confession played for the entire city. No, Terrence whispered. You said that was just for cops. I lied. Mike's smile was predatory. By morning, everyone in Portland will know what you did to my daughter. Your picture will be on every news site, every social media platform. Terrence's legs gave out. The reality of his situation was finally penetrating his alcohol-fogged brain. Even if he escaped arrest, he'd never be able to hide. His face, his crimes, his confession, all of it was now public record. Why, he gasped. You already won. Why destroy me completely? Mike knelt beside him, his voice gentle but implacable. Because deterrence only works if other predators understand the consequences. Because hope needs to see that monsters can be defeated. Because the system failed every girl you hurt, but I won't. Police sirens were approaching. Mike had called Abel 20 minutes ago, timing Terrence's capture perfectly. One last thing, Mike said, pulling out his phone. Hope wants to tell you something. Hope's voice filled the shop through the phone's speaker. Strong, clear, and absolutely fearless. Terrence McFarland, my name is Hope Edwards. You hurt me, but you didn't break me. My daddy taught me that courage isn't not being afraid. It's doing what's right even when you are afraid. I'm not afraid of you anymore. And thanks to my father, no other girl will be either. Terrence was weeping as police lights flooded the shop. Mike melted into the shadows, his mission complete. Chapter 9, Restoration. 6 months later, Mike sat in a courtroom as Judge Richards sentenced Terrence McFarland Sullivan to 25 years in prison without parole. The confession, the evidence, and testimony from 7 other victims had sealed his fate. Hope sat beside him, her physical injuries long healed. The psychological scars would take longer, but she was fighting back with therapy, martial arts training, and the unshakable knowledge that her father would always protect her. How do you feel? Mike asked as they left the courthouse. Like justice actually exists, Hope replied, squeezing his hand. Like bad people can't hurt good people forever. Megan waited outside with news that made Mike's sacrifice worthwhile. The Army called, she said. Your discharge has been changed to honorable retirement. 22 years of exemplary service, plus the circumstances. She smiled. You keep your pension, your benefits, everything. Abel Thompson approached them with Detective Brandy Wade, the woman whose daughter had been Terrence's earlier victim. She'd flown in from Seattle to testify. Mr. Edwards, Brandy said, tears in her eyes. I wanted to thank you. For the first time in 2 years, my daughter isn't afraid anymore. She knows that someone stood up, that someone made him pay. That's what fathers do, Mike replied simply. The media attention had been intense, but positive. Mike's background, his daughter's courage, and the systematic way he dismantled a criminal organization had captured public imagination. Portland's mayor had quietly ensured that no charges were filed against Mike for his vigilante justice. Josh Navarro received 15 years for racketeering, his organization permanently destroyed. Several other predators connected to the case were also prosecuted, their crimes exposed by evidence Mike had gathered. But the best outcome was simpler. Hope Edwards was healing. Daddy, she said as they walked to their car, I've been thinking about my future. About what I want to do with my life. Oh, I want to study criminal justice. Maybe become a prosecutor or a victim's advocate. I want to help other girls who go through what I went through. Mike stopped walking and turned to face his daughter. In her eyes, he saw strength, determination, and an unbreakable spirit that no criminal could touch. You know what that means? He asked. What? It means he didn't win. Terrence tried to break you, to make you afraid, to steal your future. Instead, you're going to spend your life making sure other predators face justice. Mike's voice was thick with pride. He tried to create a victim, but he created a warrior instead. Hope hugged him tightly. I had a good teacher. As they drove home through Portland streets, Mike reflected on the choices he'd made. He'd thrown away a military career to save his daughter. He'd risked everything to ensure justice when the system failed. But watching Hope laugh with her mother, seeing her plan a future without fear, Mike knew he'd made the right choice. Sometimes being a father meant more than just providing and protecting. Sometimes it meant showing your children that good people fight back, that justice exists, and that love is stronger than fear. Michael Edwards had served his country for 22 years, but his most important mission had been saving his daughter's future. And that mission was accomplished. Epilogue. 8 years later. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the Multnomah County District Attorney's office as Hope Edwards Lancaster stood before a jury, her voice steady and commanding as she delivered her closing argument. Ladies and gentlemen, the defendant wants you to believe that his victims are lying. That's 7 different women, spanning 4 years, all conspired to destroy an innocent man's reputation. Hope's gray eyes, so much like her father's, swept across the jury box. But evidence doesn't lie. DNA doesn't lie. And the systematic pattern of predatory behavior we've documented doesn't lie. At 25, Hope had become one of Portland's most effective prosecutors, specializing in sexual assault cases that other attorneys often avoided. Her conviction rate was exceptional, but more importantly, she'd revolutionized how the DA's office handled victim testimony, creating protocols that help survivors find their voice in court. The defense will tell you that these women waited too long to come forward, that their memories can't be trusted, Hope continued. But I stand here as living proof that survivors often need years to find the courage to speak their truth. Some never do. That's not weakness. That's the calculated psychological damage that predators inflict to protect themselves. In the gallery, Michael Edwards watched his daughter with immense pride. At 53, the former master sergeant had found new purpose in civilian life. His security consulting firm, Edwards Tactical Solutions, specialized in protecting families from domestic threats and corporate executives from kidnapping. But his proudest achievement sat at the prosecutor's table, transforming her trauma into justice for others. Hope's voice rose with controlled passion. Richard Gregg thought he could silence his victims through intimidation and fear. He thought wrong, because survivors like Sarah, like Jennifer, like Michelle, they refused to be silenced. They refused to let evil win. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. As court adjourned, Hope was surrounded by the 7 women whose cases she prosecuted. Their tears were different now. Tears of relief, of vindication, of knowing they'd been believed and their attacker would face consequences. Sarah Mitchell, the first victim to come forward, hugged Hope tightly. "You gave me my voice back," she whispered. "You always had your voice," Hope replied gently. "I just helped you find the courage to use it." Later that evening, 3 generations of the Edwards family gathered for their weekly dinner at Megan's house. The tradition had started 2 years ago when Hope married Leonard Lancaster Jr., the son of Mike's old Army buddy who'd helped with equipment during the Terrence operation. Leonard Jr. was a trauma surgeon at Portland General, and their shared commitment to helping people had drawn them together. "Any word on the appeal?" Megan asked as they settled around the dinner table. "Greg's attorney is going through the motions, but won't stick," Hope replied, cutting into her roast beef. "We documented everything perfectly. Dad taught me that." Mike smiled across the table at his daughter. Their relationship had deepened immeasurably since the Terrence incident. The shared trauma had forged an unbreakable bond. But more than that, Mike's actions had shown Hope that justice was possible even when systems failed. Speaking of documentation, Leonard Jr. said, "I heard from Abel today. Terrence was found dead in his cell." The table fell silent. Terrence McFarland Sullivan had served 3 years of his 25-year sentence before another inmate. A father whose own daughter had been assaulted delivered final justice with a sharpened toothbrush. "How do you feel about that?" Megan asked Hope carefully. Hope considered the question while she sipped her wine. "I feel complete," she said finally. "Not because he's dead, but because his story is finished. He can't hurt anyone else, and other predators saw that actions have consequences." "The ripple effect," Mike said quietly. "Indeed, The Terrence case had created ripples far beyond Portland. Hope's victim impact statement, delivered when she was 18, had gone viral on social media. Her words, "Courage isn't not being afraid. It's doing what's right even when you are afraid," had been quoted in courtrooms across the country. More importantly, her story had inspired other victims to come forward. The Terrence investigation had exposed a network of predators operating throughout the Pacific Northwest. 17 additional arrests had followed, with convictions in 15 cases. "I got a call from Senator Thompson's office today," Mike said, changing the subject. "They want me to testify before the Armed Services Committee about veteran transition programs." Abel Thompson had left police work 5 years ago to run for state senate on a victims' rights platform. His friendship with Mike had proven invaluable in crafting legislation that closed loopholes predators had exploited for decades. "What's the focus?" Leonard Jr. asked. "Veterans who become vigilantes when legal systems fail their families," Mike replied. Apparently, there have been 17 similar cases nationwide since Terrence. Military fathers taking justice into their own hands. "That's concerning," Megan said. "It's predictable," Hope corrected. "When you train people to protect others, then watch systems fail to protect their children, of course they'll act. The solution isn't punishing the fathers, it's fixing the systems." Hope's insight reflected her evolution from victim to advocate to reformer. Her master's thesis at Lewis and Clark Law School had examined how military families navigated civilian justice systems, and her recommendations have been adopted by 3 states. "Actually," Hope continued, "I've been thinking about something. What would you say to writing a book together, Dad? About what happened, but more about what it taught us." Mike raised an eyebrow. "What kind of book?" "A guide for parents dealing with predators. Not vigilante justice, but systematic approaches to protecting children when institutions fail. Your tactical knowledge, my legal experience, our shared understanding of how trauma affects families." The idea had merit. Mike's security consulting work had shown him that Terrence wasn't unique. Predators operated in every community, often protected by fear, money, or institutional indifference. A practical guide for parents could save other families from experiencing what they'd endured. "Title suggestions?" Mike asked. "When Justice Fails, a Father and Daughter's Guide to Protecting Families," Hope said immediately. Part memoir, part practical handbook. Their conversation was interrupted by Hope's phone. The caller ID showed Dr. Cecilia Finch, director of the Northwest Trauma Recovery Center, a facility Hope had helped establish using money from victim compensation funds. "Hope, I'm sorry to call during family time, but we have a situation. A 15-year-old girl was brought in tonight. Sexual assault by her stepfather. The family is asking for you specifically." Hope was already reaching for her jacket. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. "I'll drive," Leonard Jr. offered, knowing his wife well enough to see her determination. As they prepared to leave, Mike caught Hope's arm gently. "Remember what I taught you about sustainable operations. Take care of yourself so you can take care of others," Hope recited. "I know, Dad, but this girl needs to know she's not alone." Mike nodded, understanding completely. 8 years ago, he'd moved heaven and earth to protect his daughter. Now she was using that protection to shield other children from the same darkness. 2 hours later, Hope sat beside a hospital bed where 15-year-old Christy Mays lay sleeping. The girl's mother, Janine Houston, held her daughter's hand while tears streamed down her face. "She fought him," Janine whispered, "just like you did. When I saw the news coverage of your case, I promised myself that if anything ever happened to Christy, I'd be brave enough to call police immediately. You did the right thing," Hope assured her. "And Christy's going to recover. Not just physically, but emotionally too. I'll make sure of it." Through the hospital window, Hope could see Leonard Jr. talking with the trauma surgeon, probably arranging for specialized care Christy would need. In the hallway beyond, she spotted Detective Phil Davis taking a statement from Christy's stepfather's neighbor, who'd called 911 after hearing screams. This was how justice worked now. Not through vigilante operations like her father had executed, but through systems that actually functioned. Police who believed victims, prosecutors who fought for them, doctors who understood trauma, and advocates who ensured no one navigated the process alone. Hope's phone buzzed with a text from her father. "How's she doing?" "Surviving," Hope typed back. "Like we did. Proud of you, baby girl. Always." As dawn broke over Portland, Hope finally headed home. She drove past the warehouse district where her father had once hunted a monster, but now her thoughts were on the future. The book she and Mike would write. The legislation